And I also just want to say that when you don't resolve the hard parts of your story in light of God's love, they're like open loops in your brain. And these are the very places the enemy can get in to accuse God of things that he's guilty of. And he'll get you to take the bait, to build a case against God's goodness. Well, if he allowed that, how much worse of a thing is he going to allow? He wants you to project your fears into a future that God's not in. And it's easy to do that when you have unresolved trauma. And so it is super important to take time in the busyness of your life, even as parents of young kids, get some time away and say, this thing still hurts, Lord. Can you help me resolve this in light of your love, so that you can close that loop? So when the enemy comes calling, you can say, no, I've already talked to the Father about that, and this is what I know to be true. And he is truth. The Spirit leads us into all truth. And he can help you sort through your story in a redemptive way, so that then you become a steward of a testimony that will help others heal.
All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to this episode of No Longer Nomads. I'm your host, Josh Doyle, and just want to say thank you guys for following along this journey. We are over 50 episodes, which is crazy. I didn't know if we'd get here. I always wanted to, and so I just am so excited. I've been hearing from a lot more of you people that are excited about merch and whatnot. So pre-order is officially up. You can go to the store and you can see the shirts and the hat and some stickers we got going. Then maybe we'll bring some more out. So always got more designs and stuff in the chamber. So, all right, so we'll get to this episode. And we have Susie Larson on, and this is actually a re-release of episode 24. This episode did so well, and I heard from so many of you guys saying that was what I needed to hear. And I just think it's super relevant again. And so we're going to re-release it. So oftentimes we're like, what's the next? Let's get another guest. Let's do this. We've got a few episodes in the queue, but we thought I was down with the sickness. And as we were like editing for next week, it was like, well, why don't we just release this one again? Because it was so good. So I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this. And I just want to say thank you again for the new followers. We have 15,000 YouTube subscribers, which is bonkers. And we have 8,000 followers on Instagram, which is just crazy to me. So I want to say thank you. Welcome to the show. For those of you that are new listeners, you got to go back. There's so many fun episodes. The passion for me is to bring you guys content that will bring you hope. And so no matter what that looks like, whatever journey you're on, that you would find some hope, some inspiration from these episodes. And so that's what I hope to do and what we hope to do. And so thank you for tuning into this episode.
Josh, super honored to be here. I love and respect your family and the work that you do so much. So thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Well, when I was thinking about this topic, you and I have talked about this, and this is something so important. And for our audience, it's a lot of young families. And so keeping them in mind, we deal with all sorts of stress and burnout and anxiety and all that comes with raising young little kids. And so I think this will be a powerful episode because you raised 3 boys. And so, you're a few steps ahead of us and you have lots of insight to give to us. So excited to have this conversation with you.
Grateful. And yeah, those years can feel like a blur, but God is in the details and he's there with you. Just remember that.
So good. Well, let's jump right into it. So trauma, how is trauma linked to, or related to our body and our spirit or our soul? We might know something's wrong, but I don't know what it is. Is it unresolved trauma, or what would you say is the link physiologically to your body?
Our bodies are so fearfully and wonderfully made that they hold on to our stories, even if we think we've moved on. I like to describe it, if you picture your story like a book of pages, but the book doesn't have a spine. You've got all these pages that are floating in the air. They're the highs, they're the lows. When trauma happens, and everybody has trauma, some big T, some small T. Sometimes you have things that should have happened for you that didn't. That's a trauma. Some things that had happened to you that shouldn't. That's trauma. And we throw that word around a lot, but the truth of the matter is everybody has endured some kind of trauma. But when trauma happens, when things happen in your story that God didn't intend, it's like the enemy takes those pages and pushes them down and compresses them so tight that your story doesn't breathe anymore. What I've noticed in my years working in radio and working through my own trauma and just traveling the country ministering to women at conferences is that When those things stay unresolved, you no longer tell your story correctly. You don't see God as he is. You don't see yourself as you are. And you don't even remember your good memories anymore.
Wow.
I have ministered to women who would say they have not one good memory of their childhood. And then when I'd ask more questions, I'd find out they grew up in a wonderful Christian home.
Interesting.
It wasn't perfect. There is no perfect home, but the compression has clouded out their good memories. But the thing is, the path to healing is to remember God and to find God in your backstory. So it really, really is important. It's so interesting from a physiological, neurological perspective that even accessing one good memory and bringing it before the Lord to say, the rest of this is a mess. I'm having a hard time sorting it through. But Lord, for this, I sincerely thank you. Your brain knows if you're faking it. And when you can truly say, I see something here. This I am so thankful for. It actually fires synapses in your brain, and it helps you to access other good parts of your story. So story is so important, and even the story that our body's holding on to is just, our bodies give us a lot of information. And I'll tell you one more thing about that. A counselor friend of mine said that she's been dealing with a number of women. She sees men as well, but mostly women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who have all these autoimmune type issues, all these physiological symptoms that doctors sometimes, we're friends. We're in a life group with doctors. We love doctors. So we're in a life group with a trauma surgeon, a neurosurgeon, a functional med doc, an internist, a lawyer. So these are our people, right? So I'm not dissing doctors, but I'm saying, and they would admit this as well, that a lot of times when doctors don't know what to do with the diagnoses, they put it under an umbrella of something that just, because they don't know what to do with you. So you might have fibromyalgia, you might have this or that. But when these women would go to counseling, this counselor said over and over again, it was unresolved trauma. And when they encountered the love of God, their symptoms just eventually went away. And many of the cases. Now, I'm not saying your symptoms aren't real. I deal with daily symptoms, but we are so intimately, intricately intertwined that it's the love of God. It's walking with him through these parts of our stories. And I also just want to say that when you don't resolve the hard parts of your story in light of God's love, they're like open loops in your brain. And these are the very places the enemy can get in to accuse God of things that he's guilty of. And he'll get you to take the bait, to build a case against God's goodness. Well, if he allowed that, how much worse of a thing is he going to allow? He wants you to project your fears into a future that God's not in. And it's easy to do that when you have unresolved trauma. And so it is super important to take time in the busyness of your life, even as parents of young kids, get some time away and say, this thing still hurts, Lord. Can you help me resolve this in light of your love so that you can close that loop? So when the enemy comes calling, you can say, no, I've already talked to the Father about that. And this is what I know to be true. And he is so truth. The Spirit leads us into all truth. And he can help you sort through your story in a redemptive way so that then you become a steward of a testimony that will help others heal.
That's amazing. Such great insight. So Romans 12 tells us to renew our mind. How does trauma, give us the inability to do that, right? How can we not renew our mind if we're stuck in, let's say, unresolved conflict or tension or anger? What does that do? How can we renew our minds when we're constantly going back and, like you'd mentioned, providing loops for the enemy to enter into?
Well, when you're in that emotional part of your brain, you actually can't really get into the logical side of your brain. Do you know what I'm saying? And our emotions, we're not to stuff them, but they're information, but they're lousy counselors. And so this is, again, our bodies and our emotions are always talking to us, trying to tell us something. And I remember reading about a trauma counselor who worked with human trafficking victims, and his practice to get them to a place of healing was that idea of, he would have them spread their whole mess out on the table, so to speak, all the yuck of their story. And he would say, if you can find one, blessing in the battle, one redemptive aspect of the story, and Lord, I thank you for this. And when those synapses start to fire, there's a little neural pathway formed in your brain for healing. And it goes back to gratitude. And it's not fake gratitude. It's just be thankful. Just buck up, Buttercup. It's not that. Yeah. It really is going, God, what you allow, you redeem. And so if I'm all fired up, I think it's really important to sit with God and be a truth teller, to say, name it. I'm feeling fear. I'm feeling anxious. Lord, what do you want me to know about this? And you let him walk you to a place of truth. But Josh, those things take time.
Yeah.
And when we are just refusing to access those places or acknowledge them or be honest about them, we're going to hurt ourselves and hurt other people. As they say, hurt people, healed people, heal people. And we're all stewards of our story. And there is a way to walk with the Lord to a place of healing where you can correctly interpret the stuff you've been through. And some of it's terrible, but God can redeem it. As you say, he works all things together for the good.
Yeah, so good. So what are some examples of maybe trauma at a macro level, and also maybe something that's really small that you may not realize is if it's unforgiveness, or something that you may not realize is kind of something small that you're holding on to? Do you have some examples there that could be, this isn't tragedy or abuse. This is something small, but it could be affecting someone's daily life and they may not know it.
Yeah. That's such a good question. I have a friend who is a counselor who would get provoked and poked whenever she was in a position to feel like she didn't know enough, because she dealt with the imposter syndrome. She was a phenomenal counselor, but she couldn't get over that idea that she was never qualified to be at the table. And it was like, I had a good childhood. I've had a good education to be here. What is this? And so she sat with the Lord, and he brought her back to a time in grade school where the teacher put her on the spot, mistook her for someone else. And when she didn't know the answer because she was referring to the wrong page, she didn't have done anything wrong. The teacher's the one who made a mistake. But in her mistake, she rolled her eyes like the student didn't know anything. And that got in her. And that's the thing, is it's like the enemy knows. He's had your whole life to study you. And I often say he sees your potential long before you ever do. And he works sometimes blatantly, but other times in subtleties. Whatever he has to do to keep robbing you. My friend Maria says it this way, that we all have a pattern of theft in our life. We all do. And the enemy starts when we're little as children and conditions us to believe those lies so that he can ride in, rob us blind, and get back out again. So it honestly doesn't matter if it's a huge trauma or a little one. What matters is your negative emotions, your negative reactions, your disproportionate reactions. That is symptom of something that's not right. And the not right part, none of it's too big or too small for God. He delights in every detail of your life. He heals the brokenhearted, binds up your wounds. But you got to be humble enough to go and even ask the people around you, what are my blind spots? Where do I tend to overreact? Where am I provoked? And I'll give you an example from my own life. Yeah. I was raised in a large family in a denomination where I knew God was real, but the gospel was never preached. So I had a sense of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I knew the God of heaven was real. As a child, I felt his presence. I didn't know Jesus was accessible. I knew about him, but the gospel was never preached. My dad was the mayor of our city for 27 years. I'm one of 7 kids, and we had a sense that we needed to behave, because our dad was the mayor. Yeah. My brothers did not get the memo. I'm just telling you. They just didn't read the memo out. But the sisters, we tried hard to behave.
Sisters did.
Yes,
That's funny.
But I was 5th of 7. And when I was about 9 years old, my mom needed to get a job to help put food on the table. And around that time, my brothers were hanging with creepy friends that I didn't like. And they were getting into porn and pot and stuff like that. Yeah. And I came home from school one day and I saw their bikes out front. I saw my mom wasn't home yet, and I just had this pit in my stomach. I'm like, I don't want to be around. We had this 2-story house of kids coming and going. When you got these creepy brothers' friends, it was just like, I didn't want to be there. But so I went down to the laundry room to get my change of clothes. I was going to get a sweatshirt and go up in my bedroom and read a book till my mom got home. And all I remember is having my hands in the dryer, looking for my sweatshirt, and the laundry room door shut behind me. And I turned around to see 4 of my brother's friends, no brother, just these friends staring at me. And in moments, they had me pinned to the floor and sexually assaulted me as a 9-year-old. And I got up from that, and I was absolutely confused about, was that my fault? Would I bring scandal on my family? And so I just shoved that into the basement of my soul. But I didn't ever sleep through the night after that. I had so much terror and so much fear. And when I was 10, I was walking home from school. I was still only about 4 feet tall, and I saw their bikes out front. And this shows you how confused my little brain was.
Yeah.
But I said, I don't care if God made me this way. Those boys will never touch me again. I just said it out loud to myself as I'm walking across the baseball field. And a different group of boys who were hanging out in the dugout, all I hear in my peripheral was, get her. And they ran out of the dugout, ran me down, knocked me to the ground, and pummeled me, beat me to a pulp.
What in the world?
For sport. And so, like, I was this little girl. They were kicking me in the stomach, punching me in the face, pulling fistfuls of hair out, and laughing as they did. And I'm screaming and crying. And they're just, I remember the crazed look in their eye. I mean, I know in my adult mind now they were high on something. Because who does that to a little girl, you know? And when they were done with me, they shoved off of me, and I can still hear their laughter as they walked away going, do you believe we just did that? And I had scratches on my face and a fat lip, and my hair was snarly, and my tummy hurt. And, you know, I was so traumatized. And I got up, and I heard in my ear, I can get to you anytime, anywhere, and God will never stop me. And so as a child at that moment, I knew the devil was real too.
Wow.
And when I got into middle school, I found out as a decent athlete. I was a gymnast. I sang in the choir. I helped in the office. And I did all that stuff. If I weren't traumatized, I would have done that stuff anyways. Those were some of the gifts God gave me. But because I felt like I was in an identity hole, I was misusing my time, treasure, and talents to prove something that Jesus had already proven. And that's what we do. When you don't deal with trauma, you squander your gifts because you're trying to earn your way back. You're trying to prove yourself in a way that Jesus won on the cross. And when I became a Christian in 8th grade, and it's too long of a story to share here, but I was a private Christian because of our denomination. I wasn't allowed to read the Bible. Okay. And so I would sneak to the Bible study in the next community over and lie about it. Oh, the irony.
That's funny.
I would come home. My mom would be like, how is the library? And I'm like, this whole family needs this library. Everybody needs this library.
Yeah.
I mean, this man
especially
taught
the boys.
Especially my brothers need the library.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, most of my family's saved now. What God has done in our family is absolutely amazing. But when I became a young adult and my parents released me to leave that particular denomination and just run hard after Jesus, I was so passionate about Jesus, but I still had undealt with trauma. So I was serving in 5 committees at church. Again, partly passion, part of it proving. You know, and when I met my hubby, who was raised in the church, and we got married young and had a honeymoon baby, you know, I was serving in all these ways. We were kingdom people, but I still had undealt with trauma. So during our middle pregnancy, I was high risk. I was put to bed for 3 months and had a traumatic delivery with that son. And then with our 3rd pregnancy, I was put to bed for 6 months. So I had a 1 and a 3-year-old in 6 months of bed rest. And if you want to confront all your insecurities, call in all your friend favors and watch them get tired on your behalf. And I mean, I realized even before then, I was always giving more than I was taking. And a part of that is that's my nature, but part of that is proving and striving and never wanting to be anybody's debt. Because I knew I was saved. I didn't know I was loved. And I would submit to you, Josh, many Christians, even pastors and leaders and elders, are walking this planet with a right theology around salvation, but they don't know they're loved. And love changes everything. So I'll just jump ahead. So in the 6 months on bed rest, it was just a nightmare come true for us. We were going broke because we had partial insurance. So every trip to the hospital was costing us money. My hubby was getting exhausted. My friends were going away. I just felt so flawed and insecure. And I was probably 3 months into bed rest, and the doctors knew I was getting kind of depressed and had a 1 and a 3-year-old, and they're crying every day that they'd pull them away from me to take them to a friend's house. I want to stay with mommy. And 6 months of that, it was so yucky. Hard. And so at 6 months along, they let me get up, and I met my old college roommates, and it was a fall day in Minnesota. Went for a walk. I was very careful. Had lunch. I was just like, I could see the sky, the warmth of the sun on my face. It was like, this is what real people do. And by nighttime, I was contracting again. So I was back on bed rest. And 2 weeks from that outing, a friend came to visit and said, hey, can I get your water for you? And I said, yeah, it's over there. And I pointed, and pins and needles shot out my arm. And then all of a sudden, this numbing, buzzing feeling started at the base of my skull and pulsated around to my whole face was pulsating with numbness. And then my vision blurred. The room started to spin. And long story short, a series of neurosymptoms started to spring forth in my body with 3 months left to go. Now, I had a friend at the time who was getting sick of me, and she's like, "Oh, really? Now this? It's always
Sure.
something with you."
Yeah.
And I like to say she had the gift of discouragement, because I could feel her irritation, but it just reflected how I know.
Yeah.
And the thing is, prior to this, I taught fitness classes at our church. We did a Bible study, and then I teach aerobic classes and stuff. And there was a gal at our church who was also a young athlete who got MS, and she spiraled down so fast that we both saw that. We saw her tremoring as she's walking down the hallway months before that. So when she heard about my neuro symptoms, when she said, it's not one thing, it's another with you, she said, it's personalities like yours that most often get MS. And I've got 3 months to go in this pregnancy.
Sheesh.
When she left, I felt like the devil had me by the throat. Like, you have no say in your life. You have no say in your story. And Josh, I can't explain to you the palpable fear that I had as a young mom. There was even a point where after we delivered, my health plummeted. Kev had to haul me into the ER, and they thought MS or brain tumor at first. And he carried me out of the car, put me into bed. And he was about to walk out, and I grabbed his arm and pulled him back. And I was just weeping, and I said, "I want you to divorce me."
Oh.
And he said, "What?" And I said, I can't ask you to do this. This is not what you signed up for, even though it was. This is what we signed up for in sickness and in health. But I'm like, I'll go live with my mom and dad, and you marry someone who loves Jesus, who's healthy and can play with these kids and be a good partner. And I just was like making his plan for him. And he's put his finger on my lips, and he said, "You listen, you are my bride, and you always will be. And if I have to kneel down to kiss you because you're in a wheelchair, then that's what I'm going to do." And, that was Jesus with skin on for me, because he wasn't talking out of the emotion of the moment.
Yeah.
He'd been paying a price for 6 months of hard work. And suddenly we're looking at delivering a third child and a incapacitated wife. It was so hard.
Man.
But his unwavering love, it was like God in my face going, "This is what love looks like. This is what acceptance looks like."
What a gift from God,
Oh man, I'll never be able to pay him back for that. Not that I need to, but I feel like that did something in my heart. But once we delivered Jordan, and my health did the up and down, and they ruled out MS brain tumor. And a year later found out that one day off bed rest, when I met my friends in college, I was unknowingly bit by the deer tick.
Oh,
and contracted Lyme disease. And so it's been a road for 3 decades of neurological, this because I've battled. But but when I found that out, what did I hear in my ear? I can get to you anytime, anywhere, and God will never stop me. And so that has been my journey. And so there's been a lot of trauma. But I've also, as you say, Josh, I've had small things that have heaped in with the big things. And that's why you need to walk intimately with Jesus. You don't have to figure it all out on your own. When you follow the Savior, you follow the healer. He knows about the nuances of your story. And my healing has been slowly. It's not been linear. It's been layer by layer.
Yeah.
But it's not been wasted on me, this battle. I know some things about the Word. I know some things about the enemy and his tactics. And I know a lot about God. And he's so good and so faithful.
So good.
But I feel like one of the things that gets me out of bed every day is, in my radio show, in my books, and my speaking, is I want people to heal. And then I want you mobilized in your high calling so that you make the devil sorry he ever messed with you. Because
That's
what's
amazing.
possible when you contend for the promises to go, you know what? This is a false identity. And what you're putting on me, I am not a victim. I've been victimized, but I'm not a victim. I'm an overcomer. I'm a child of God. I've got the promises of God written over my head, the Spirit of God in my heart. Mm-hmm. And you don't get the last say about my story. And so I want people healed, and then I want them mobilized, because again, healed people heal people.
It's so good. There's so much I want to say, and so many different ways I want to go about this. First of all, thanks for sharing that. That is heartbreaking about your youth. And so you've walked the walk. You're not just telling people, hey, if you've got trauma, just deal with it, pray through it, or give you some step-by-step antidote. But this is, you've walked the walk through some intense trauma. And so I think of this, as I was preparing to chat with you here, and so often in the church, you have a friend that's got the spirit of discouragement. We've all got people like that in our lives. And so what does that do to you when you can barely make it through a day? And you have someone that just tries to offer you hope, but you can tell that behind that there's judgment, and you just got to be grateful. If you were grateful, maybe this wouldn't happen. Or maybe if you prayed more, you wouldn't be experiencing this depression. What would you say to someone listening to the show right now that's going, I've got some depression. I feel people around me. I was once active and now I'm maybe similar story with you. I'm stuck at home and my chained to the house. What encouragement would you give them? How would you speak to them?
First of all, that's so hard because you're so vulnerable, you're so beat up, and the last thing you need is Job's friends telling you, what your problem is. And I just got to say, after circling the globe a few years, I really believe that people do that because they're so uncomfortable with your pain, and they want to be able to say A plus B equals C. And if I can figure out this formula and determine that you missed a step, then I can make sure I don't have to go through this. So they're trying to sum up your pain to protect themselves, but they're not stewarding your pain. And you just need to know, when Jesus saw the crowds, in the crowds, there were people who got themselves into trouble, and there were others who came upon trouble, were victims of life circumstances. He didn't sort them through. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion. Now, the nuanced way he walks us through, there are times of correction and direction. But I will tell you, when you come upon people who are judging you in your pain, summing up, assigning motive, trying to tell you what step you missed, it's not helpful. And if you can kind of form a little bit of a boundary, I remember Darlene Check. Remember her? Shout to the Lord. Do you remember that song?
Yeah.
She was on my show a few years ago. She walked through cancer, almost died. And she felt like she was rushed, I think, if I remember right, in the ambulance, 3 different times on the verge of death. But the Lord had given her promise that she would not die but live. And so the people who were spewing fear or spewing judgment, because this was a fight for her life, she drew strong boundaries. She's like, I cannot have you in my inner circle right now. I'm fighting for my life. And so she said, I'm sorry, I just can't. I can't hear that right now. Now, I feel like this is a show for another day. I think boundaries that sometimes are wielded.
I would love to talk about that. Yes, absolutely.
I think sometimes they're wielded in a very self-protective way, and they use it as an excuse not to deal with hard things. So that said, I do feel like when someone's doing that with you, you have to practice detached love, where you, even if it's just figuratively, but in your spirit, you move them out to an outer circle to say, you don't get to speak into my life. You don't get to have the power to hurt me because you're not reflecting Christ's heart for me. And, I just think when the Spirit of God is on someone as they're walking with you, they want your best. They are cheering for you.
Yeah.
They're not coming to your pity party because that's not good for you, but they're loving you back to life,
Yeah.
So
good. So forgiveness, what role does that play in trauma and healing from trauma? And then to piggyback that, what if the person who's hurt you has never changed, right? You're still, Lord, I got some anger in my heart towards that person, and they should feel it. And, they say you're the one drinking the poison, trying to make someone else feel the pain you're going through. So what would you say is what does forgiveness do? And not just I forgive that person, but what does that truly look like when someone won't change?
That's such a great question. And it's such a painful proposition, but I will just say that the longer you postpone forgiveness, the more you're triangulating with the enemy. You're inviting him into the conversation, and he has power over you and over them. Because especially as a believer, you're giving him legal access to territory he does not have the right to occupy. And I have a friend who's a lawyer. I've had her on my show a few times, and she as she learned about even the judicial nature of God, and she learned something about, she had ministered to people who had things happen to them that we can't even talk about that were so bad. And the Lord taught her something and kind of downloaded this process. She calls them mercy trials. And it goes further than forgiveness. It's not only, and she says, you bring that person before the Lord, just, in your own time. She's like, for me, she walked me through a mercy trial with these boys who did what they did to me. She brought up a little notepad that said attorney-client privilege. She had me flip over the top and say, did they hit you? Yes, write it down. Did they punch you? Yes. Did they pull your hair? Yes. Write down these crimes, because it's not they hurt my feelings. You have to have something, and then you bring it before the court. And I'm just giving you an example. This was so powerful for me.
Yeah.
And so I didn't remember their names. I remembered a few of their names, but I said, so-and-so, this is what you did. You violated, you betrayed, whatever. You are guilty and deserving of punishment. But because of the love and the forgiveness and the mercy that I've received from Jesus, I forgive you and I extend mercy to you. And now, enemy, I serve you notice. I plead the blood of Jesus over this transaction. You're no longer allowed power over me or my story. You no longer get to triangulate in this conversation. I cut you off from my story. I don't know if that makes sense. And friends, if you want to hear more about that,
very practical.
Go where podcasts are played, type in Susie Larson, Melissa Coleman. She explains it much better than I did. But what she has learned, when people go beyond forgiveness to releasing mercy, you literally take the power away from the enemy. It's for your healing. And the thing is, if you don't trust that God is a God of justice, you don't know who God is. You don't think he rages against pedophiles. He hates what the wicked do. He's kind to the wicked, but he hates what they do. If you look at Psalm 18, when someone cries out to God in their distress, you notice the anger of God. Smoke blows out of his nostrils. I mean, he blasts at the blast of his breath. He comes down and rescues me, and he's angry because someone oppressed me, and he rescues me because he delights in me. When it comes to your pain, he's not indifferent about anything. And so to hold on to your unforgiveness is to say, I'm more righteous than God. I don't trust him to deal with this, but he will deal with it so much better than you, but he won't deal with it if you're dealing with it. So to fear God enough and to love your story enough to say, I don't understand God's ways, but I know he won't let this go. Somehow, some way, because righteousness and justice are foundations of his throne, I've got to be committed to my healing enough. And as to refer back to something you said earlier, sometimes that forgiveness is massive T trauma. Sometimes that forgiveness is, I don't like how they looked at me, or they annoyed me, or, whatever. And you have these little grudges you're holding on to, and you don't even know the legal access that you're giving the enemy that he doesn't deserve. Wow. So, one thing, Catherine Marshall was one of the greats who've gone before us. And years ago, I read a bunch of her books. And she and her husband every night would do the anything against anybody prayer, because scripture says if you have anything against anybody, forgive them. Because she's like, I don't want anything hindering the power of God through our ministry, our life, and our family. So she'd sit with her husband and ask the Lord, is there anything against anybody? So they kept really short accounts on these things. And she said sometimes she'd realize it was some bratty kid at the bus stop who was bratty to one of her kids, and she had a grudge. We accumulate those things. So to keep fresh confessions before the Lord just kept her heart clean. And if you can think of it as access, who are you giving access to? Right. And it says what you think about God if you're unwilling to forgive. Maybe you need a fresh revelation and encounter with God and what he's forgiven in you. This is serious stuff, and there will be no healing without forgiveness and without a renewed mind. And nobody can do those things for you. It is a work that we are called to, and it's really not optional, and it's essential if you want to heal, and especially if you want to be used by God.
That's so good, so powerful. So as you're saying, these little things can stack up, like grudges and selfishness. We've talked a lot about trauma. Does anything come to mind about selfishness or anger? I mean, another foothold to give the enemy. It's all right in line with the stuff we're talking about. It may not be capital T trauma like we were discussing, but what about some of these things? Again, it's, grudges or anger or selfishness. Selfishness, I think our culture, man, everything's about us, right?
It totally
and that
is,
one, we can all fall in that trap. Anything you would say, practical tips you'd recommend there?
Anger is a secondary emotion to fear, hurt, and frustration. So anger happens after you've encountered fear, hurt, and frustration and not resolved it. And this is why I'm talking about. That's why the scripture says, guard your heart with all diligence and be diligent in working through the issues of your heart. So I would again sit with the Lord to say, I'm so mad. I mean, he wants you to truth tell. But if you can be honest, step back and go, am I afraid? Am I hurt? Am I frustrated? And sometimes frustration is selfishness. It's this entitlement. It's this thing that I deserve more than God is giving me. And that attitude and that posture will, again, block the best of what God has for you. And I would submit to you that when you're in a selfish mode, you're in a scarcity mode. You're grabbing for yourself because you don't think God's going to be good to you. And so to me, the answer to that one would be to start looking around. Someone once said, what if you woke up tomorrow with only the things you thanked God for today? What would you have? What if you woke up tomorrow with only the things you thanked God for today? What would you have? So I would say if you are tempted to be selfish, I would first of all find out, Lord, what am I believing that you're not providing for me? What am I, how do I think you're holding out on me? Like, help me identify the lie that I believe and the truth I need.
Yeah.
And then I would just humble yourself and start to look around and thank God for the blessings in your life. And then ask God, who can I help? Because the antidote to selfishness is unselfishness. When you get wrapped up in yourself, you make a very small package, you know? And I'll say in my book, Fully Alive, I think you and I've chatted about that before, but I also talk about the physiological implications of insecurity. That, you know, insecurity is another form of selfishness because you're just living with you in mind. And sometimes you see people just giving their whole lives away, and it has kind of a martyr complex, but they're not true martyrs. They just don't think they're very valuable. So they don't matter. So their yes doesn't matter. And they're laying it all down for God. But what kind of offering is it to him if you don't value you very much, right? It's just a different kind of self-obsession. So to know that we are of great value to God, and because that's true, to guard our hearts, to steward our negative emotions, and to fear God enough to say, the goal is to get back to the fruit. Love, joy, peace. You know, and like Dr. Rob Reimer is a regular guest on my show. He goes, that's always the indicator if you're in step or out of step. What are your levels of love, joy, and peace? You know, what are the negative emotions that are surfacing? That is a work that we are called to if we want to stay abiding in the vine, walking in the Spirit.
So good. So insightful. And I love the practicality of everything you're saying, because, you know, we could talk about it ad nauseum and not have any, well, what do we do with this? And you're so practical. And so I love that. Another thing I'd love to touch on is this fear that wraps up our daily lives, you know, and I'm sure you felt that. And there's days, my wife as well, when she was really going through some incredibly hard moments through depression and, you know, battling stuff with her stomach and her health, and just could barely function. And just same thing. It felt that way of, wow, I went from so active to why am I here? And I can't get out of bed, or I can't see past another day. And so that leads me to this idea of bracing for impact, or waiting for the other foot to drop. What advice do you have for someone that's maybe stuck in that mode of, God, what good do you have for me when I can barely see through to tomorrow?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. You know, so as part of my story, 10 years ago, I had a massive relapse. So I was really sick for about 7 years. And then for about 20 years, I couldn't get out of bed probably 4 or 5 times a year. So every few months, my face would start to go numb, and I would have a flare up, and I'd be sick. I'd down for a number of days, feel sick for a couple of weeks, and then I'd come up swinging. But I was a fitness instructor for over a decade. That was how I fought, you know. So other than that, I never felt great, but at least I had a life. But I kind of did that up and down for 20 years. And then 10 years ago, I had a massive relapse, and people with chronic neurological Lyme apparently can't process mold. And I'd been unbeknowingly been pre-exposed and overexposed to black mold that affected my cognitive ability. So I started to have severe cognitive, and I'm on live radio. Suddenly my tongue and my chin and my neck were going numb, and the ears were ringing so loud, my vision would blur, my face would buzz, and I couldn't remember what words were going in my sentence. And I'm on live radio. I'm writing my umpteenth book, and I forgot how to spell very basic words. It was terrifying. Wow. And the flare-up and the symptoms were at a magnitude that were so different than even what I'd walked through, that at first doctors didn't know what was going on. I had terror, absolute terror. So fear, I just want to say I know all about it. I've written a lot about it. I have battled it. And one of the things I learned, before I talk about bracing for impact, one of the things I learned about fear, our doctors, a couple of my doctors are Christian, and they said, your inflammatory markers are off the charts. You have so much inflammation in your body. We'll help you with that. But you have to do something about that fear. Because the fear,
Interesting.
when anybody's in fear, Josh, anybody, you literally set off a cascade of inflammatory reactions in your body. So let's say you have an old football injury, you have a bad knee, and something happens with one of your kids, and suddenly, and the enemy's always looking for, he's vying for position,
yes.
and fear is his favorite weapon because perfect love casts out fear. And as my son says, perfected fear also casts out love, right? So fear is always vying for position in your story. So let's say you have some fear. There was a near miss with one of your kids or something, and all of a sudden you notice your knee hurts. That is true, and that's physiologically real because inflammation goes to your weak points in your body. And so when I started to study that, I thought, I have so much terror in my body that I'm adding to the stress of my body. And so I started to learn more about that. I did some study on brain science. And when you're in fear, your body goes into such fight and flight that your cells cover up on themselves. And I want to explain this because I think for some, this may be, for me, it was a motivating factor. I've got to do something about this fear. When I realized I'm shooting myself in the foot by not dealing with this fear. So like they did labs on me. I'm a pretty health-minded person.
Yeah.
I drink 130 ounces of water a day. My labs showed me dehydrated. I eat healthy.
Wow.
My labs showed that I was malnourished. I'm like, how is that possible? They said fear. They said when you're in fear, your cells cover up on themselves, so you don't get the benefits of your discipline. They're in survival mode. Your body's trying to get through the moment. It's not caring about nutrition or hydration. It's like we're under attack. And so by allowing that fear in my body, I was actually hurting myself worse than almost anything. And then I learned in the brain with these neural pathways, the more you take those pathways, the faster you travel on them. So it's like when you're thinking depressing thoughts, thinking fearful thoughts, your brain is so efficient, it's responding to the most consistent choices you make. And I realized if I put a road closed sign on my fear pathway and I literally don't use it for 30 to 40 days, my brain will delete it. And so I thought, I have to do this. I can't live like this. I have so much fear. So I came up with a statement that worked for me. God is good. His promises are true, and he will always make a way for me. So every time my face would go numb or the room would spin or I'd feel inflammation in my brain and I want to go to fear, like what if something worse? I would say, God is good. And I just did a new neural association to the point that anytime symptoms came, my instinctive response was, oh, God's good. His promises are true. He will always make a way for me. And I felt physiologically my body shift. I will say around that time is when a friend came to me and said, you look like you've lost your joy. Like you're just bracing for impact. And she's a godly woman. She wasn't judgmental. She had so much compassion. And at first, Josh, I thought, well, this is a natural response to an unpredictable disease. This is a living hell sometimes, you know? But her compassion triggered something deeper, like there's more God wants to say to me here. And I brought that to the Lord, and he showed me I was disappointed in him. I was so hurt that he allowed this. And he brought me to the story of John the Baptist. And John was in prison, whatever. And he sends his friends to ask Jesus, are you the Christ, or should we be looking for someone else? Jesus had said that no greater man was born of woman than John. I mean, and this is his cousin, and they had done ministry together. John saw, the heavens open up, and, he had a front row seat to the glory of God. But when he's away from the action, he had his doubts. So that should actually comfort you that you're not deficient when you're getting battered by life and you deal with some questions. But Jesus' answer is very telling. Go tell John, the blind see, the lame talk, the deaf hear, the lame leap for joy, Miracles are still happening. Even though you're away from the action, I'm still the same God. But then he says, blessed are those who are not offended with me. And I knew in the worst part of my battle, my work was to remember two things. God is the same God. And I'm blessed when I'm not offended with him. And I had to get back to that place of peace. And to get out of bracing for impact was for me to look at all the ways that he was showing up. Because when you're zeroing in on your fears, you're not seeing the provision. And there is provision. He's providing. He's making a way. But if you're not looking for it, you're going to miss it. But the more that you start to look around going, wait a minute here. He gave me new mercies. There's food on my table. I've got a fluffy pillow. I've got a husband who's still with me. And the more that I'd start to thank God, the more my eyes opened up to his unbelievable provision. And that's where my book, Waking Up to the Goodness of God, came out of. This is a 40-day pilgrimage to get you out of bracing for impact to anticipating the goodness of God. And I've had, when I was going through that process, my husband said, your eyes look different. Your skin looks different. Like physiologically, my body started to rest when I got out of fight flight. So the final thing I'll say about that is it's bad for us physiologically and spiritually to be, you can't at once live with this holy expectancy. God, what do you have up your sleeve?
Yeah.
And locked elbows, what are you going to allow in my life? You can't do those at the same time. And it's bad for your spirit and it's bad for your body. So to get to that place to go, I have legitimate reasons to fear, but I have more reasons to hope. And you turn toward the Lord. He will bring healing to your soul. And then you'll see him clearly and you'll see your story correctly.
Wow. I love that. Changing the posture of your heart is so key. And thank you for sharing that. That's so good. I do have a question, and I know we're getting close to time here, but I have one that we could spend another 45 minutes on easily. But for the spouse, the dad listening, going, I'm doing a little bit more than your average dad here. Your husband's role was key. What do you have to, or maybe it's the wife and the husband's, unable to get out of bed or stuck in deep depression. And it's the wife that seems to be going, man, I feel like I'm just, burning at both ends here. What encouragement would you have for that spouse? It's just looking in, man, I feel helpless. I wish I could help my wife, my husband here. What would you say to them?
Well, yeah, we could talk about that for 45 minutes.
I would love to. Yeah.
So I will tell you, my hubby was working 3 jobs to keep food on the table when our kids were young. And when the crisis settled down, he didn't slow down. He had overdeveloped the muscle of work ethic and he became a workaholic. So our marriage flipped sides and he was for years pretty absent, and it really affected our marriage. We talked very open about it. I actually wrote a book years ago, Alone in Marriage, Encouragement for the Times When It's All Up to You.
Wow.
And the book is about intimacy with God. I mean, your spouse could be in seminary or he could be in sin. He could be in the military or he could be playing video games. But no matter the reason for your aloneness, the same stuff surfaces. I even test read this book with military wives in Germany because I wanted to just say, am I hitting the mark here?
Yeah.
But it's anger, it's fear, it's loneliness, it's self-righteousness. And one of the lines in the book is, it takes a lot of humility to let the fire refine you when someone else is guilty of lighting the match. Now, when you think about that, like maybe they're guilty because they're sinning and they're leaving all, or maybe they're sick and they can't help it. But no matter what, it's a fire. And the thing is, when you're near the fire of God, he consumes your foes and your flesh. But you can come through it without smelling like smoke. So if you can stay humble, and you can stay teachable, and whatever the reason for this season, if you put your own oxygen mask on and you say, Lord, show me what's surfacing, because I just want to say, I'm not simplifying. This is hard stuff, but what he allows, he redeems. And so, Lord, show me what this is bringing up in me, and I'm going to lean in to let this be an opportunity for me to be conformed in your image. And as you're transformed from glory to glory, you'll be amazed at how God's able to redeem the marriage as well. So, I mean, the best path forward for you is putting your oxygen mask on, cultivating intimacy with God, and responding to the things he's showing you that you need to see.
Well, Susie, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've learned a lot from you just in our conversation here, and I cannot wait to have you on future shows. So everyone, make sure to go to her podcasts or listen to her radio show, pick up her books. You will be so grateful that you did. Full of so much wisdom and insight. So Susie, would love to have you on again soon. And thanks for coming on the show.
Love and appreciate you, Josh. Thanks for having me.
For you listening, thank you guys. Make sure to like and subscribe. Give us a 5-star review. That helps out a ton. If you enjoy the content, pass it on to someone. Pass it to a friend, to a family member. This is a part-time kind of side passion for me, but I'm having so much fun doing it. And I've been hearing from you guys that you're enjoying this, and that's keeps me going as well. So help continue the show to grow by passing it on and giving us a like, a subscribe, and we're so thankful for you.